Tell somebody you heat your house with pine, and you'll probably be told you're burning the wrong wood. You should be burning hardwood. Hardwood burns hotter. Hardwood lasts longer. Softwood is just kindling. But what if that advice is making you overlook some seriously good firewood? Because there are situations where the so-called inferior softwood is actually the smarter choice, and the reason has almost nothing to do with whether the tree is called hard or soft. In fact, those two names are where the whole misunderstanding begins. Here's the strange part. Hardwood and softwood don't actually tell you how hard or soft the wood is. They are botanical groups, not grades somebody gave the wood after hitting it with an axe. Most hardwoods come from flowering trees. Oak, maple, hickory, ash, cherry, and cottonwood are hardwoods. Most softwoods are conifers. Pine, spruce, fir, cedar, and larch fall into that group. And this is where the labels start getting ridiculous. Balsa is a hardwood. Yes, balsa. The stuff so light you can make little model airplanes from it. Cottonwood is also a hardwood, yet nobody who has burned good black locust and cottonwood side by side is going to tell you the word hardwood makes them equal fuels. On the other side, you have larch, also called tamarack in parts of North America. It is classified as a softwood, but it is relatively dense and tough compared with many other softwoods. I have heard plenty of northern wood burners praise tamarack for serious heat. Some treat it like premium firewood. The tree apparently forgot to read the label. This matters because people hear hardwood and mentally translate it into dense, hot, and long burning. Then they hear softwood and translate that into light, weak, and fast burning. Sometimes those descriptions happen to fit. Sometimes they do not. Species matters. Density matters. Moisture matters. What you need the fire to accomplish matters. The botanical label alone tells you much less about the actual fire than most people assume. Still, there is a reason hardwood earned such a good reputation among people heating homes through cold winters. And once we get into that reason, the argument becomes much more interesting. Let us give hardwood its proper credit. A lot of the famous firewood species are hardwoods for a very good reason. White oak, hickory, sugar maple, black locust, Osage orange. These woods can be dense, and density matters tremendously when you are loading a stove. A dense piece contains more dry wood mass in the same amount of space than a lighter piece of the same size. Put several dense hardwood splits into a firebox, and you have packed a lot of fuel into that stove. That usually means longer burns, strong heat, good coal beds, and fewer trips to reload the stove. When it is bitter cold outside, and you want to go to bed without getting up every couple of hours, that is valuable. Nobody wants their wood stove acting like a newborn baby at 3 in the morning. This is where something like seasoned white oak can shine. It is dense and can provide a long, steady burn. Black locust is another favorite among serious wood burners. Dense, hot, and capable of producing long-lasting heat. Hickory has earned its reputation too. When properly seasoned, it can produce tremendous heat. But all that density comes with trade-offs. Dense rounds are heavy. Some species can fight you when splitting, and several premium hardwoods can take a long time to season, especially when pieces are large or drying conditions are poor. That is not a small detail. Fantastic firewood that is still wet when winter arrives is not fantastic firewood. Hardwood often wins when you need a lot of energy packed into limited firebox space. But what if that is not what you need? That is where the old hardwood rule starts falling apart. Fast burning gets treated like an insult in firewood discussions. This wood burns too fast. That wood does not last overnight. Fine. But who said every fire needs to last overnight? It is October. The house is chilly in the morning, but the afternoon will be warm. Do you really want to load the stove with your best dense hardwood and still be opening windows at lunchtime? Sometimes you want heat now. Then you want the fire to settle down. That is a job where many softwoods make perfect sense. Dry pine, fir and spruce can ignite readily and give you strong heat quickly. They are useful for starting a cold stove and bringing it up to operating temperature. Douglas fir is a perfect example of why the simple hardwood rule fails. Across parts of western North America, Douglas fir is serious heating wood. It can provide good heat. It is widely available in many areas, and people have heated homes with it for generations. Then there is tamarack. I have heard stories from people using eastern larch in temperatures around 40 below zero, and getting enough heat that an overloaded stove became the bigger concern. That does not sound like weak firewood to me. Of course, do not take that as permission to overfire your stove. Any fuel capable of producing serious heat needs to be burned within the stove manufacturer's limits. But the point stands. Softwood can produce plenty of heat. The difference is often how quickly that energy is released, and how much fuel mass you can fit into the stove at once. For a quick morning fire, that faster burn can be an advantage. For a cabin you just arrived at in freezing weather, quick heat is useful. For starting a fire, it is useful. For mild weather, useful again. Fast does not mean bad. A sports car uses fuel quickly too. Nobody complains that it failed to behave like a tractor. But there is another advantage to many softwoods that becomes extremely important if your woodpile is running behind schedule. And this one can make supposedly inferior wood outperform premium oak. If I had to choose between properly seasoned pine and wet oak for tonight's fire, I would take the dry pine. No hesitation. That sentence may irritate somebody who has spent the last 30 years calling pine garbage, but moisture changes everything. Wet wood burns poorly because part of the heat from the fire has to drive water out of the wood. You get less useful heat, more smoke, and poorer combustion. The species name does not rescue you. Oak is excellent when it is properly seasoned, but dense hardwoods can take time to dry. Large oak splits stored in poor conditions can hold internal moisture far longer than somebody expects. Looking old is not the same as being dry. Many lower density softwoods can season considerably faster when they are split and stored correctly. That can be a huge practical advantage. Suppose you are new to wood heat and you do not have a 2-year supply sitting behind the barn. What helps you more? A species with fantastic numbers on a BTU chart that will not be ready when you need it? Or a local wood that you can actually get dry? The stove knows the answer. It does not care what your firewood chart says. And this is where people make another mistake. They compare perfectly seasoned hardwood with poorly handled softwood, then decide the species caused the difference. Compare dry wood with dry wood. Measure moisture on a freshly split face if you want a useful reading. Then judge the fuel. Proper seasoning can turn an ordinary species into useful firewood. Poor seasoning can make premium hardwood miserable. But the moment you say dry pine burns just fine, somebody somewhere starts typing one word: creosote. And this may be the most stubborn softwood myth of them all. You have probably heard it. Never burn pine. Pine is full of resin. Pine coats your chimney with creosote. Burn enough pine, and one day your chimney will turn into a Roman candle. There is just enough truth mixed into this story to keep it alive. Yes, pine contains resin. Yes, wood smoke can contribute to creosote deposits. And yes, chimney fires are dangerous. But blaming the word pine misses the bigger problem. Creosote forms when smoke and combustible vapors cool and condense inside the chimney. Conditions that produce cool, smoky, incomplete fires increase the problem. Wet wood is a major offender. Poor draft can contribute. Running a stove improperly can contribute. A chimney staying too cool can contribute. Smoldering fires can contribute. Dry pine burned properly in a suitable stove does not automatically create some special pine-powered chimney disaster. And wet hardwood does not receive diplomatic immunity because it came from an oak tree. Your chimney cannot identify leaves. It responds to combustion conditions. That does not mean you can ignore chimney maintenance because your wood is dry. Chimneys still need proper inspection and cleaning. Stove installation, flue condition, and operating temperature all matter. And some softwoods can throw sparks, burn quickly, and create strong heat, so you still need to understand the fuel you are using. But the blanket statement that pine should never be burned because pine causes creosote is far too simple. Plenty of people in regions dominated by conifers heat with softwood because that is what grows there. They are not rebuilding their chimneys every Tuesday. The more interesting question is why oak can still produce so much more heat from a cord than pine if both woods contain useful energy. That sounds like a contradiction. It is not. The answer is hiding in the way we measure firewood. Here is where firewood numbers can fool you. Look at a chart showing heat output per cord, and dense hardwood usually crushes lightweight softwood. That is real, but it can give people the wrong idea about what the wood itself contains. On a dry weight basis, different wood species are much closer in energy content than their numbers per cord suggest. The huge difference comes largely from density. A cord measures volume, not weight. Take a cord of dense hardwood, and you have packed a large amount of dry wood mass into that space. Take the same volume of a lightweight softwood, and there is less wood mass there. Less mass means less total stored energy in that cord. That is why dense hardwood is so valuable when storage space or firebox space is limited. You can fit more fuel into the same volume. But now compare by weight instead. A pound of dry softwood and a pound of dry hardwood are much closer in heat potential than people expect. There can still be differences between species because of chemical composition, including extractives and resin, but the giant gap you see on many cord charts is mostly telling you about density. Makes sense, right? This also explains something wood burners see all the time. You can get a roaring hot fire from softwood. You just may need more volume of it to provide the same total heat over a long period. That is not the same thing as saying it cannot burn hot. A fluffy comforter and a folded wool blanket can fill similar spaces and weigh completely differently. I know, now we are comparing firewood to bedding. Somewhere my grandfather is shaking his head. But the distinction matters. Heat per cord answers one question. It does not answer every question. Because unless your firewood teleports itself into the stove, there is another measurement that matters. How much work did you do to get that heat? Firewood charts love numbers. Millions of BTUs per cord. Density, weight, heat value, all useful. But there is one column missing from most charts. How much aggravation did this tree cause before it finally reached the stove? You have to find it, cut it, buck it, split it, move it, stack it, season it, carry it inside. Then clean up the bark that somehow travels farther through the house than the firewood ever does. Some extremely dense hardwoods are wonderful once they are burning. Getting them there can be another story. A twisted piece that fights the splitter, takes forever to dry, and weighs enough to remind you about that old back injury may still have excellent heat value. But free straight-grain softwood growing close to your woodshed starts looking pretty attractive. Availability changes the whole calculation. If you have acres of Douglas fir around you, driving a long distance and paying good money for oak, simply because somebody online said hardwood is superior, may not make sense. Likewise, if your property is full of dead ash or maple, use what your land gives you responsibly. The best theoretical firewood can become terrible practical firewood if it costs too much money, time, or labor to obtain. This becomes more important as you get older. At 25, wrestling giant rounds can feel like exercise. At 65, you start wondering why the tree could not have fallen closer to the splitter. Heat per unit of effort matters, and nowhere is that clearer than when you compare different regions of North America. Because the hardwood versus softwood argument changes dramatically depending on where you stand. Spend enough time talking with woodburners and you notice something quickly. People often treat their local experience as a universal law. A man surrounded by oak, hickory, and maple says nobody should bother with softwood. Of course he says that. Look at what he has available. In much of the eastern and central United States, excellent hardwood species are common. Generations of people learned to heat with oak, maple, ash, hickory, locust, and other hardwoods. That experience gets passed down. Then somebody in the Pacific Northwest hears the same advice while standing in a forest full of excellent conifers. Different game. Douglas fir is widely used for heat in the West. Lodgepole pine matters in parts of the Rockies and farther north. Tamarack or larch can be highly valued where it grows. Spruce and other conifers become important farther north, where hardwood choices may be limited. If a local species is abundant, accessible, and performs well in your stove, that matters more than whether it wins a national popularity contest. I have heard woodburners say the best firewood is the closest firewood. There is a lot of wisdom in that. A perfect tree 50 miles away has one serious flaw. It is 50 miles away. Regional differences also explain why firewood arguments get so heated. One person has burned pine his whole life with good results. Another has access to premium oak and sees no reason to touch pine. Both experiences can be valid. The mistake happens when either person assumes his woodpile represents the entire continent. But there is still one job where those dense hardwood fans have an extremely strong argument. When the temperature drops hard and you want to sleep through the night, density becomes difficult to beat. Now we get to the job where I want good, dense hardwood. Overnight heat. If I have a properly operating stove, properly seasoned wood, and a bitter cold night ahead, dense hardwood has a major advantage. Firebox space is limited. I want to pack useful fuel mass into that space. White oak can do it. Sugar maple can do it. Hickory can do it. Black locust can do it extremely well. Osage orange is famous for very high heat output, though high heat fuels need to be burned sensibly. More is not always better. Your stove is heating equipment, not a blacksmith competition. Dense hardwood tends to provide longer burns because there is simply more wood mass packed into each load. Good coaling species also leave a bed that can make restarting the fire in the morning easier. That is valuable when it is 10 below zero and the only thing you want to do before coffee is remain alive. But even here, I do not necessarily want one species for everything. A mixed wood pile gives you options. I may want something lighter to get the stove going quickly. Then medium density wood for normal daytime heating. Then the dense premium stuff when I need duration. That is not compromising. That is using each fuel for what it does well. People do the same thing with tools. Nobody complains that a hammer is terrible because it cannot turn a screw. Firewood should be treated the same way. And once you start looking at wood by the job it performs, rather than the category it belongs to, the whole hardwood versus softwood argument becomes much simpler. Here is the question I would ask instead. What do I need this fire to do? If I need quick heat on a cold morning, dry softwood can be excellent. If I am starting a cold stove, softwood can be useful. If it is mild outside, and I only want a short fire, a fast-burning fuel may be exactly right. If I need wood that can season relatively quickly, many softwoods deserve a serious look. If storage space is limited, and I want maximum heat packed into each cord, dense hardwood becomes much more attractive. If I need a long overnight burn, dense hardwood usually has the advantage again. And if one decent species grows everywhere around me, while the supposed premium species requires money and a long drive, availability may settle the argument before the chainsaw even starts. There is no rule saying your woodshed has to pick a team. In fact, I would rather have choices. Quick burning wood, everyday wood, dense overnight wood, kindling, different sizes, different species, all properly seasoned. That gives you control over the fire instead of forcing one fuel to handle every job. The mistake was never liking hardwood. Hardwood deserves its reputation. The mistake is believing the word hardwood automatically means better firewood. It does not. A wet piece of oak is still wet. A dry piece of Douglas fir is still useful fuel. A lightweight hardwood does not become dense because of its botanical family. And a good softwood does not suddenly become bad because somebody's grandfather refused to burn it. Grandfathers knew plenty. They also drove cars without seatbelts and thought one thermostat setting was good enough for the entire marriage. We are allowed to examine the evidence. Density matters. Moisture matters. Burn time matters. Your stove matters. Your climate matters. Availability matters. And most importantly, the job matters. That is the real way to choose firewood. Hardwood is not always better than softwood because hardwood was never a firewood quality rating in the first place. Choose dry wood that fits the job, your stove, and the region where you actually live. And tell me in the comments which softwood you think gets far less respect than it deserves.